Calvin Presbyterian Church sits in Elwood City on the western edge of Pennsylvania. Like many congregations, it is in a changing neighborhood due to the loss of factories and businesses. These changes have also impacted the church as it tries to discern the best ways to reach out into the community.
It's sort of an area that has experienced a lot of decline with the loss of the steel mills. In the last few years, we've identified sort of this neighborhood here as a place where we need to start trying to build bridges and try to do outreach there.
One way Calvin Presbyterian Church has done that has been through a summer lunch program that offers warm meals 5 days a week to area youth. The day also consists of kickball and other activities that keep these children involved, including a program called Gospel Conversations.
Not so much trying to teach them, here's how a Christian behaves, but trying to make sure that they grasp the nature of the gospel and the grace of Christ.
While the youth seem engaged, Sean admitted that he and the congregation haven't been completely sure how much impact they are having on these youngsters in the community. But one summer evening, those questions were answered. A couple of South Sudanese mission partners, along with missionary Dr. Nancy McGahee, gave a talk at the church that night, and it seemed to change the way some of the boys viewed the church.
The idea was just for us to have sort of a potluck meal and to hear them share their testimonies of their own lives and involvement with the church there in South Sudan, and then to hear from Dr. McGahee about her work in South Sudan.
It's pretty well known that if the Calvin Church parking lot has cars in it during the evening hours, that there's most likely food being served somewhere in there. The neighborhood boys regularly make their way into the building for a meal, but normally find an excuse to leave once their plates are empty.
That particular night, I felt like this was something that they could maybe benefit from more than other things that we've done. And so I kind of made the deal with them. I said, you're sure you can stay and eat with us if you stay for as much of the program as you can and introduce them to our guests. And they were kind of interested. So they said, yeah, we can stay, but it was only for maybe 20 minutes, and they all had somewhere to be. And as Daniel and Joel started sharing, and they didn't have pictures or videos or PowerPoint or anything like that. They were just standing there, sharing their stories, but very captivating stories of kind of life and death and how their faith was a part of that. And it certainly captured all of our attention, but these boys were also drawn into it. And so they stayed. At one point in the time when Daniel was sharing, he actually kind of singled them out to ask, as he was asking the crowd more rhetorically, what have you done to follow Jesus Christ, or what are you doing for his church? What do you do for his kingdom? And he singled these boys out who were sitting at a table by themselves as a question for them. He was reflecting, I think, on his own youth, and was waiting for them to answer, and it was kind of a very awkward and tense moment. I'm not sure if he quite knew the dynamic of their place in our congregation, but nonetheless, it was just a couple of moments later, one of the boys leaned over and said, we can stay a little bit longer.
Some of the boys did leave before the program was over, but several others stayed until the end of the 90-minute program that included testimonies and challenges. A few of the boys were asked to take the offering, and one even contributed some of his own money to the plate.
What I saw that night was that these boys started to understand something about what it was we do. And when they showed up later that week or the next time we gathered for our summer ministry, for the lunches and to play kickball or whatever, normally we play our game of kickball and we have our discussion or our gospel conversation at the end of the time after lunch even. So the boys showed up wanting to know what was this all about? How do we know these people from South Sudan, and what do we know? How are we connected with them? Do we bring people in often, and do we always take up money, and where does that money go? They were interested, and they wanted to know how all that worked. And it was clear to me, I think, that they started to understand that what we were talking to them about faith and sort of the folks that serve their meals, and when we talk about we do this for Christ, and these same boys play in the parking lot often during worship, and they hear us singing, and it seemed like something connected with them, that something having to do with the reason we serve those meals, the reason we hang out with them and spend time with them and care to know them, and the reason we gather for worship on Sunday morning and sing these old songs is connected to these people on the other side of the globe who are doing dangerous and courageous things in the name of Christ there as well. And that was a big breakthrough for them, and I think also for us to see that these boys see themselves as a part of our congregation, even though they are not in our worship service on Sunday morning. They are interested in the work of Christ, and the challenge for us going forward is how to involve them, not just in those conversations of the gospel, and maybe to challenge them a little more than we might have had courage to before in terms of what are you doing for Christ, but to think about ways we can bridge the gap between the worship of our congregation and worship for them, which maybe might not look exactly the same, and might require us to sort of do some of the translation work for them and try to find a way of worship that works for them.
One boy has firmly grasped the spirit that he felt that night by beginning to attend his church and taking steps to join that congregation through its confirmation class.
While that has not brought them to be, members or active participants in our own congregation, I think nonetheless that's bearing fruit for the kingdom of God here.
That night certainly made a difference in the life of some of the boys who came out for a free meal but left with the Spirit on their hearts. It also had an impact on that congregation, too.
The Spirit was definitely at work in the word that was shared, both in the words, literally the words shared, but the word as in, the sharing of Christ and the interpretation that happens in our hearts as we hear that was definitely seeing the Spirit at work there. I think God is drawing us towards giving us a compassion and understanding for the people in our communities that takes time and relationship and stories like that for us to see that we are more a part of their lives and they're more a part of our lives and a bigger part of the church perhaps than we realize.